So, here we are, reality check. The tax base will lose $1.9 million to $3.5 billion in property value. For those of you who live in Houston, y'all will be picking up the difference. The annual loss of 38 to 70 million in tax revenue for the city, for the county, for the school districts, for the hospital district, any taxing entity that is will be affected by that. So, and this is an annual loss. This is not a one-shot deal. This will happen every year. There's no efficacy in the no build on vacant land. FCOH had an engineering company do a study. Andy Icken had proposed that in their research before they passed this ordinance, that if 1,000 lots would be built out, 1,000 vacant lots, like my building lot next to my home, if 1,000 homes were placed on those 1,000 lots, that it would raise the BFE 5 feet. Now, for those of you who are engineers in the area in this room, you know that if the BFE raised 5 feet, it would be flooded solid, probably from Tomball all the way out to the Gulf. So we're thinking that was probably not exactly true. So we did check with an engineering company. In reality, it was less than an inch. It was 0.87, and that was everything in the kitchen sink thrown in. I think in reality, the real number was something like less than half an inch. So there is no efficacy. There we go. Talk right through that. Chapter 1943 is unconstitutional. If, in fact, it is necessary to take the total utility out of my property for the public good, then, in fact, the Constitution says that I must be paid for that property, and we stand by that. We have, within our group, there are 5 lawsuits that have been filed. Each is in a different area, different sorts of configurations, and so they're moving through the court system as we speak, and so far the results are pretty good. I've talked to you about that. As I said before, the restrictions do not have a significant impact on Houston's flooding problems. The real issue here is that the drainage system is derelict, and Public Works is happy to tell you that there hasn't been any true work on the city of Houston's drainage system in 50 years, and that's how come we're flooding. So if you live in Houston and your neighborhood is swamped every time there's a heavy rain, it's usually not because the bios have come out of their banks and are swooping through the neighborhood. Typically, it's because the street flooding is rising up above the curves and threatening houses that are unslabbed on grade. And that would be because the drainage system that's within those streets is desperately undersized. And as infill development occurs, that stresses the system even further. It's just simply cheaper to take my land than it is to repair that derelict drainage system. And they're happy to tell you that the derelict drainage system is a huge, huge factor in why Houston is flooding. So I've said that. Sloppy and non-existent code enforcement. One of the things that we know is happening is that detention basins that are required, whether they work or not, I guess is sort of maybe not my question, but if it is required by law, then in fact they should be built and they should be functioning. But there is no system put in place at this point to maintain whether or not those detention basins are in fact functioning. And just within my own neighborhood, I know a major expansion and development that never bothered to put in the detention basin. So that would be one of the reasons. If in fact those detention basins are supposed to be working, then that would certainly contribute it. And whoops. So how did this happen in our democratic system? There was an inadequate notice of public meetings concerning the ordinance changes, and I know that somebody earlier had talked about what does community mean. Well, the stakeholders that were involved in this, of those stakeholders that the city had pulled together, none of them owned property in the floodway, so it was really, really easy to devise this ordinance to implement on folks when the folks were not there. So I think someone said that the public 3x5 card placed in the basement on the bulletin board for 48 hours prior to their public meetings. This third one is really a very interesting one. We've talked to quite a few council members, if not really particularly all of them, and almost without fail, they will say to you that they didn't quite understand all the factors that went into this regulation. Most of them will be happy to tell you that they were told that that FEMA made the city do this, that the city of Houston would lose all FEMA flood insurance if any building was allowed in the floodway. This is patently not true. We've had FEMA come and speak with us directly. We've had FEMA come to the city of Houston, and they spoke publicly, and they deny that emphatically. They have guidelines, there's nothing that says that this ordinance was necessary to keep flood insurance intact in Houston. So there's a lot of conversation about that. So what's happening to us? Well, there's a severe restriction on land and its use and utility, and I really basically covered that. No one wants to buy the property. Property is sitting on the market for months and months and months and months. Property that had been selling within 60 days is still on the market a year and a half later. With prospective buyers telling realtors, you know, it wasn't in the floodway, I would have bought it a long time ago. It's a great piece of property. We're not talking about old shabby homes either. We're talking about lovely cottages that have been renovated. We're talking about brand new construction, because in my particular part of the world, there is a lot of gentrification that has gone on. There are, of course, no permits to build, and that makes for a problem. All of that is causing neighborhood blight and slumming, and that now I have vacant houses. I have vacant lots that we are having to maintain, so that it is, in fact, causing that downward spiral to 90% of its original value. As an appraiser told me, it wasn't so much that, boom, you're going to have a 90% reduction, but as the ordinance, like a cancer, eats into the reason why people want to buy homes in a particular area, then it reduces the marketability, because folks just do not want to be there. It's a lifetime investment loss. I cannot recuperate from this, nor can the 85-year-old neighbor across the street. What do we want? We want to restore our property rights and the protections of the law, and it needs to be within the law. City of Houston has modified their regulations or their guidelines, their instruction manual to their employees at Public Works, so that at this point now we probably could rebuild should there be a fire. Now I have to elevate my house, 18 inches above the BFE, which is probably okay. But in my particular case, I could have maybe a $21,000 worth of damage in a fire to my kitchen, and have to spend as much as $50,000 to elevate my home. So the regulations and guidelines are cost prohibitive. So we want codification of reasonable building codes. Essentially, we want things to go back to the way they had been. It worked, and whatever is wrong with the city and flooding is because of the city's dereliction of duty, not